I'm really excited to have the pleasure of introducing all of you to our very first keynote, whom I consider one of the experts in looking at grief across social media. Associate Professor Moa Eriksson Kritok is based in the School of Media and Communication Studies at Umeå in Sweden. She's the editor of the Journal of Digital Social Research, and she's also connected to the Center of Digital Social Research. Now, I happen to have known Moa for years and years, at first through her work, through her writing, and then post-pandemic, we were very honored to be able to meet in person for the first time. And having read her work and also attended a few of her presentations, I know so sure that she's got this uncanny ability to identify disparate case studies and weave theoretical narratives so we see these not in isolation, but as a phenomena of people coming together to narrate human culture in digital spaces. Moa's keynote is entitled Digital Death Humor, Exploring TikTok Grief Vernaculars. And without further ado, I'll hand the time to her. Over to you, Moa.
Wow, thank you so much for that introduction. I'll share my slides now with all of you and just say thank you first and foremost to the organizers for bringing us together for this symposium today. When I first began studying grief on TikTok in 2021, I never imagined that we would one day be gathered here discussing this field in such depth. As Crystal said, my name is Moa Eriksson Kritok. I'm an associate professor in media and communication studies here at Umeå University in the north of Sweden. And I'm here in the very early hours of the morning. It's 6 o'clock. I almost want to quote Adele with her full fucking glam on 8 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, but I'm not actually that glamorous. The kids are just about to awake. The dog's paws are starting to click across the floor. And I get to spend this morning with all of you in this lovely format. So actually, I'm eternally grateful. Now, death is a sensitive subject in many regards. It hurts, it shapes us, and sometimes it is simply blatantly absurd. In this work, I've centered around the role of humor in digital death discourse as expressed on TikTok. And although humor and death may appear as contrasting themes, the convergence of these topics online reveals a complex cultural, emotional, and social processes being at play. With digital platforms like TikTok becoming arenas for open and inventive discourse, my work centers on deaf humor in these spaces, offering a new perspective perhaps on how societies navigate issues of mortality and loss. And mourning has historically been guided by these cultural scripts that dictate who, how, and for how long one should grieve, with these extended mourning periods then often thought of as maladaptive. And in fact, the American Psychiatric Association added a psychiatric disorder in 2022 called prolonged grief disorder, PGD, in their DSM-5, where the core symptoms of PG are a persistent yearning and preoccupation with the deceased. However, these societal limits of time for grief may increase societal norms of mourning. And in a study of Cacciatore and their colleagues, they found that half of the participants expressed then a desire for more emotional support in their grieving that did not just focus on simply fixing their grief, and instead they found a need for timeless support that was especially sought after. And this means that social support in mourning is crucial. And the theory of continuing bonds in mourning, done by Dennis Klaus and others, could fill this function by relating to the relationships that as not, so to say, broken, but continuing even after death. And grief is culturally specific, meaning that the conditions of mourning are shaped by both collectives and nations, historical conditions and social norms. And in the words of Holmberg and her colleagues, death becomes real and life becomes mortal through the actions framed by the economy, media, art, scientific knowledge, law, societal institutions, and so on and so forth. Scholars have found the importance of digital platforms for sharing and expressing grief by actively using social media after the loss of a peer, directing messages to the deceased, sharing memories of them, finding comic strategies through these then digital spaces can allow for new personalized forms of grieving. Some emphasize how social media serves as a modern-day medium for posthumous communication and ongoing connections with the deceased through these continuing bonds, so to say. Social media holds the potential to disrupt societal conventions of mourning, offering new ways of sharing grief. And scholars have shown how platforms allow people to challenge these mourning norms and create new forms of collective remembrance. And on TikTok, grief becomes an ongoing public process rather than a private linear journey, as I found in my research at least. The affordances of the platforms, such as the short form video formats, the remixability of content, and their algorithmic distribution as well, shape how users engage with grief-related content, but also find connection in what I've at least previously termed an algorithmic closeness in grief. And this space offers both connection and contention, where expressions of loss can resonate deeply, but also become the subject of debate. And especially when it aligns with non-conventional communication forms, such as using memes or other humorous contexts. Research shows that humor plays a complex role in grief. While some studies highlight its benefits, where laughter and positive emotions can ease bereavement and even reduce levels of depression, humor can also strengthen social support among grieving friends, for example, reinforcing their pre-existing bonds, but often when it's used with sensitivity. However, not all humor is found to be helpful from a psychological perspective, at least. Peake and colleagues found that certain forms, particularly maybe self-defeating or maladaptive, as they call it, humor, can worsen grief-related health issues. And digital spaces may further complicate this then. Online, self-deprecating humor is common in coping with everyday struggles, as Osk and Crystal Aberdeen have found. But these humor norms may also be supportive, or may not be supportive for those in grieving. And this highlights the need to understand how digital humor may shape grief discourse, both as a coping tool and a potential stressor. Now, what we know about humor then is that context matters. The rules of engagement needs to be apparent to all members of the group. So we need this mutual understanding in order to succeed then with landing a joke. But social practices are different for different communities, both off and online, and especially also across platforms. So the grief talk space fosters certain ways of interaction, while others might not. So is it always considered okay to joke about death and what happens when content travels? In my work on grief, I got to interview some of the research participants, and Katie, whose clip we just saw in the beginning of her trip to the Kalahari with her family, right after her brother had died, actually, she told me, I had meme pages from Instagram use that video for their reels without my permission, and I got ripped apart. Instagram is very different from TikTok, but I'm glad TikTok understood it. So the vernacular of humor, and often maybe dark humor, is one aspect of TikTok that has shaped content creation on the platform in many forms. The juxtaposition of trauma on the one hand and humor on the other is often shaped by the technological affordances of memes, sounds, and performativity. And this rings especially true for the work that I've been doing together with Tom Divin on the uses of TikTok during the war in Ukraine, focusing then on war influencers. On this new form of war documentation, where TikTok has become a primary venue for capturing these day-to-day hardships, reframes traditional war zone imagery through TikTok's meme-driven narrative style. And here, a distinct personal perspective, often with a POV-styled storytelling, diverges from these mainstream media portrayals of war, often incorporating playful elements like trending dances, set to popular songs maybe. This content has garnered significant global attention, propelling its creators to unprecedented levels of fame as well. Vittorio Barone, who's a humor scholar, he has said that online humor can function as a cushioning glue for social cohesion in times of societal upheaval. The technological conditions, affordances, and collectives of certain platforms shape these mutual understandings of humor when used for social cohesion. And in fact, humor can fill this function, spoken from a sociological perspective. Because in fact, Antonin Orglik, who's a sociologist, he highlighted the sociological function of gallows humor during the Nazi occupation of Czechoslovakia, already in 1942, noting how it fostered group cohesion and boosted morale amidst these ongoing, actually, violent attacks, saying, I may go so far as to say that gallows humor is an unmistakable measure of the good morals and spirit of resistance of the oppressed peoples. Similarly, humor emerged as a coping mechanism after large-scale disasters, terrorism like 9/11, aiding communal recovery. But apart from research and theoretical understandings of humor, I actually came across this interview with Alok, the internationally acclaimed poet, comedian, public speaker, and actor on The Daily Show in January, just this year, where he actually said that comedy is a sacred ritual where we can alchemize and detoxify things that are so profoundly painful and turn them into something beautiful and bountiful. And I actually think that this description says maybe more than the theory ever could. So my work on death humor then corresponds to these ways of communicating and responding to adversity, both in and beyond life itself. And this work on death humor presents maybe broader theoretical scope to understanding digitally mediated humor concerning death, both within and beyond the actual process of grief. And I focus on death pranking challenges, digitally mediated conceptions of the afterlife in skits, and postmortem confessionals of those bereaved. Inspired here by a range of scholars, this work has been shaped by those before me. Johanna Sumjala, who's also here today, in her book Mediated Death, she says that in addition to a vernacularization of death, she argues for the commodification, instrumentalization, and manipulation of death in contemporary media and related society. Tamara Neese, in her brilliant book Death Glitch, she says that facing the realities, so to say, of death is in itself a radical move in a world that would sooner avoid this subject altogether. And in her book Television/Death, Helen Wheatley, who's a professor of film and television studies, she recently wrote this book that I've yet to find in actual physical form. That's called Television/Death. She says that as a medium of direct, intimate, and domestic address, television seeks to bring us closer to death. And Wheatley posits here that television becomes a site where personal histories intersect with public memory, allowing individuals to reconnect with the deceased through this then communal experience of watching. And relatedly, one may wonder not only about the role here of TikTok for its archival qualities, allowing users to, so to say, revisit the deceased, but also about the everyday ephemeralities of death when transmitted through our devices and also carried around in our pockets. It draws users closer, maybe, to their own mortality, creating new opportunities for communal expressions of grief and remembrance. And these digital spaces can provide a venue not only for mourning, but for maybe also engaging with death through humor, a powerful, often subversive mode of discourse that can challenge the taboos and sensitivities also surrounding death. So in December of 2022, TikTok saw a surge in videos featuring users pranking their family members during their ongoing holiday gatherings. The celebrity death prank challenge involved announcing the death of a beloved celebrity to elicit then a shocked reaction, with the prankster then fabricating a breaking news style declaration. For example, "Oh my God, Tracy Ellis Ross, dead at 52, followed by a shocked disbelief. This prank drew polarized reactions, while some viewers found humor in these responses from their relatives. Others saw it as insensitively capitalizing on grief and shock. Now, Christmas also, typically a season of joy and togetherness and family, was here briefly interrupted by the unexpected announcement of a celebrity death. And this, so to say, temporary rupture highlights the significance of digital death pranks as tools for exploring these societal attitudes towards grief, communal identity within these families and relatives, as well as these parasocial relationships to celebrities. And termed parasocial grief by de Groot and Leith, a celebrity death can cause this mourning in ways that almost a real-life relations would. When a celebrity dies in this prank, it disrupts their presumed connection, inviting participants to explore emotional boundaries through these staged then death announcements. And in many ways, the prank itself allows individuals to simulate an experience of loss, almost trying on, even if it's unwillingly, the emotional weight of mourning a public figure. Humor about death, risks, causing offense, trivialization, and maybe ethical dilemmas. And these videos sparked debates about the appropriateness of deaf humor, raising critical questions about when humor might go too far. And here, critical voices were adamant in stating the inappropriateness of pretending someone had died when they had not, in fact. And some TikTokers refer to themselves as going to hell for participating in this trend. In these reactions, it was apparent, maybe, that some believed death was a topic that could not be used as fodder for pranking and was not, in fact, considered funny. The TikTok user, the TikTok character, I should say, the heaven receptionist, she is portrayed by the user Taryn Delaney Smith. Known for her comedic approach, Smith's character, she's called Denise. She plays the role of a sassy, gum-chewing receptionist stationed actually at the gates of heaven. And in her videos, Denise meets newly arrived souls and humorously discusses who is and who is not allowed into heaven. Through humor, these skits offer audiences a space to approach death, grief, and these existential questions of actually what happens in the afterlife. And these skits reveal a significant trend in digital spaces. The comedic framing of the afterlife to soften maybe our existential anxieties about death. Her heaven receptionist character brings a light-hearted, almost mundane approach to the typically solemn and religious concepts of the afterlife, evoking a surreal juxtaposition that appeals to many of her viewers. As a former receptionist herself, Smith draws on her own experiences in crafting Denise, creating a character that feels both humorous and authentic, chewing gum, swirling her iced lattes, and complaining about the broken printer. Her skits include typical office situations like that, combined with the occasional growl entering the office, clients disappearing mid-sentence because they get resuscitated and brought back to Earth, and getting calls about the whereabouts of famous historical figures. Interestingly, Denise's role as Heaven's receptionist has taken on a life beyond this comedic intent, becoming a solace for many followers who thank her for holding space for laughter while still mourning, of course, their loved ones. And some of her followers request that Denise also meet their loved ones at the gates of heaven, seeing her as a comforting presence for their own departed relatives and friends. In the comment section of her videos, these mourners make requests that Denise actually often meets. In one such instance, she is requested to meet the friend of a TikTok user who's stating in her comment to one of her videos, "If you don't mind, can you welcome my friend Leah, please? She's shy and probably scared because she was only 20 and it happened so fast." Utilizing then the reply to comments feature on TikTok, which allows her to create a new video with their comment included in the video, Denise meets Leah, who is presented as scared and unsure of herself. She's standing off screen as she enters the reception area of heaven. And Denise actually hugs her and provides her with words of support, saying, "You can make new friends too up here if you like. Who are you a fan of? I can look them up for you." These skits, though comedic in framing, also provide a framework through which audiences can explore these religious and existential questions about their own afterlife and the afterlife of their relatives and friends. And this blend of humor and death highlights the emergence of digital content that, so to say, bridges the personal and the existential together with the humorous and the very solemnly absurd. Lastly, I explored the confessional series created by Sarah Lauren and her sisters, Katie and Megan, as they navigate life after their mother's passing. Through a series of TikTok videos, the sisters share anecdotes that they address directly to their late mother, often even ending with the phrase, "We'll continue to disappoint you." These humorous, self-deprecating confessions cover all of their missteps in managing these adult responsibilities that their mother once handled for them, such as maintaining a car insurance, making the often complex and bewildering aspects of postmortem responsibilities feel more manageable. They laugh about their mistakes, and viewers laugh with them. A few weeks after this series began, I actually lost my own father and had to deal with these responsibilities myself. And I actually found their confessions surprisingly calming in the midst of great confusion. In one of their most popular posts, they recount how they unknowingly drove an uninsured car for nearly a full year after her death, and they recalled the license plate of their mother's beloved car, ACK, saying, "Rest in peace to ACK," and whenever the numbers were, "Oh, and to you," followed by wheezing laughter, underscoring the situation's absurdity. The series gives viewers a glimpse into how humor, maybe particularly dark humor, can facilitate resilience by reframing loss as something that, while deeply impactful, of course, also contains these elements of the absurd. And in doing so, they demonstrate how mourning on a platform like TikTok can feel both then traumatic and humorous all at the same time. And in the process of sharing these confessions, laughing at themselves and the absurdities of post-life grief and all of these responsibilities, the sisters create a unique form of digital mourning that has resonated deeply with audiences who see reflections of their own experiences in the absurdities and challenges of bereavement. And within their comment section, they do receive a lot of gratitude for talking about their late mother, while at the same time here sharing their laughter. Occasionally, followers will share their own experiences of losing their parents or relatives or friends, and how this series helps them in dealing also with their own loss. So what is then the role of TikTok for shaping a digital death discourse? By exploring the intersections of humor, grief, and digital mourning practices, this work speaks to how content engage with these existential questions about death and the afterlife, offering a unique lens for understanding mortality, where TikTok becomes an existential media for posing questions about death and the afterlife. And TikTok could just as well become a medium of direct, intimate, and domestic address, where these digital mediations of our mortality could potentially bring us closer to death. However, we also need to critically question the role of death in a potential spectacularization of death, where commercial interests, algorithmic visibilities, and attention economies drive both, of course, content creation and the interests. And because of this, I'm happy to find this room today of scholars dealing with this issue of TikTok and grief. And I do look forward to the rest of this full day and hearing all of your brilliant insights. I'm so happy to be here. Some of this work that I've been sharing it today is published or in print, but I'm also happy to share any of my manuscripts with you if needed. So just hook me up and I'll provide all of this for you if needed. And with that, I just want to say thank you so much.